Well, Rhys has popped up. So, Rhys, do you want to introduce yourself and say a bit about anything you want, really, or how you got into classics, that sort of thing? That'd be great.
So yeah, hi, I'm Rhys. I'm in my last year, just finished doing my exams, like a couple of us here now. I got into classics through the Class Civ A level, so it wasn't something I knew I could do, but I actually found it through not getting my first choice of sixth form, which was a bit of a happy accident. So I got through all of it through that and just general reading. I didn't come from a language background, so if any of you don't have languages, please do feel free to ask me any questions about how I found it later on. And yeah, one of my favorite things about the classical world at the moment is like economics of grain, which just sounds really boring. But I got an article on my phone this morning, so it's the first thing in my brain. So I'll pass on to somebody else.
Yeah, so maybe Charlie. Charlie, do you want to say a bit about who you are and how you got into classics?
Hiya. So yeah, I'm Charlie. I have just finished, like Rhys, my fourth year doing classics with study abroad at Warwick. And I kind of got in through the language route. But a bit later. So I did my GCSE in year 11 because my school started a Latin after school club when I was in year 10, so I kind of got in through there, and then fell in love with like doing Latin and continued at A level, and then obviously came to Warwick and doing classics. So I studied Latin, Greek, and then history and literature and things like that. So yeah, that's me.
Charlie, can you say something about your year abroad? Where did you go?
I went to Rome on my year abroad. Sadly, it wasn't the entire year because of the current situation, but I just had the best time. I was able to obviously study classics in like the home of classics, Rome, which is really cool. So I'd like be going to my lectures on ancient Rome and then walk out and be in basically ancient Rome, which is amazing. And then also I had the opportunity to travel around the rest of Italy a bit. So while I was there, I got to go up to the north, went to Florence and Pisa, you know, the usual sites that people go to, and yeah, it was just the best. And I think that was one of the reasons I picked Warwick as a university, because of the opportunity to study abroad alongside my degree, which was yeah, definitely a huge selling point for me.
Brilliant, thanks, Charlie. I should just point out that Rome isn't the centre of the classical world. Obviously, Boeotia is the centre of the classical world, but I'll give you Rome might be a bit more important to some people. Thank you, Charlie. George, are you around?
Yeah, I am here.
Excellent.
Yeah, I got into classics mainly because, well, like quite a lot of kids, my mum read me the myths as a child, and I always found them very entertaining. And when I went into school, because I was lucky enough to start Latin from quite a young age, and that we always did a bit of mythology around that, but not a whole lot. So it kind of, I mean, and at school, when I was in A level, we were able to do classics as the A level option. So it's when I started that I got really into classics. And so that is why I did a classics degree, basically. There's not really too much of an interesting story behind that. But what I currently find particularly interesting, I really enjoy Hellenistic art, which, if you don't know, the Hellenistic period is, it comes after the death of Alexander the Great and is basically Greece from around then to sort of the rise of the Roman Empire, I'd say. So it's the art that sort of developed from the classical art, which is quite rigid and stiff, to more dynamic sort of poses and things in architecture. Like you might know the Venus de Milo, that's an example of Hellenistic art, or the Nike of Samothrace, which is in the Louvre. So it's pieces like that I really enjoy studying quite a lot of depth, and sort of the history behind them and sort of what they represent and show us about the people who made them and things like that.
So when did you get into the Hellenistic? Was it doing the Hellenistic world module in the second year, or were you?
Yeah, because in that module it sort of covers that's our core module in second year at Warwick. So in that module we cover like everything in the Hellenistic world, from art to philosophy to politics to, well, pretty much any aspect you can think of, really. So it's through that I really got into Hellenistic art. I enjoyed art before, but it's because at school we did classical art and archaic art, but we never moved on to Hellenistic art. So
Yeah.
it's sort of the development, and it's just the pinnacle of Greek art, in my opinion. So
I think that's one of the most interesting thing about studying classics is that you can have studied something at school, and then when you come to university, you get a whole diversity of different modules, and then you start to get interested in little niche things, like Rhys with the corn or whatever it was that you're interested in at the moment. But you suddenly discover things that really spark your interest. And with classics, you can go in whatever direction you want, really. You know, if you find Rome boring, then pretty soon you can scrap Rome and just study Greece and Boeotia and, you know, the good stuff. But, you know, your freedom is there to choose and go in whatever direction you want. And that's especially true, I think, in a sort of split between sort of history and literature as well. Some people are really interested in the sort of the literature side of things, and others more in the material culture or the history. And you're able to go down whichever paths you want. And so this is one of the reasons why it doesn't really matter whether you don't have the languages when you come into study classics, because some people want to study the literature in the original language, and other people, it's not that important. You know, you're not going to use it if you're studying certain things or reception. So, you know, there's a whole broad spectrum of people coming in to study classics at Warwick. No single person is, you know, everyone is an individual. No one is like anyone else. So it's great. Okay, thanks, George. Is Annie around? Calling Annie.
Yeah, hi. I'm here. Don't forget me. Yeah, I'm a second year, unlike these guys, and I study straight classics. And yeah, I got into classics. I started doing Latin at quite a young age, like George, but I think it was starting to do things like literature when we got towards GCSE level that really kind of sparked an interest for me. And I took Latin and classical civilization for A level, and then obviously came here and started Greek from scratch, which I've actually quite enjoyed. Yeah, and I'd say I'm very much interested in sort of minorities in the empire, in the Roman Empire, and looking at sort of ideas of how the Romans kind of conceptualized the enemy, and sort of, you know, the ways that can be seen, not just in sort of kind of historical or geographical texts, but also in things like poetry or in more sort of material culture ways, and how they sort of interacted with those people on the edges of the empire in Africa or in Arabia or Spain or wherever. So yeah, that's what I found really interesting.
It is really interesting, a different way that people react to sort of, you know, in the Greek world, the different images that you have of barbarians. You know, at some point you have Herodotus, who is really interested in sort of other peoples, in a very sort of positive way, and then other depictions of barbarians are completely the opposite. And you find that especially in Rome and the Roman Empire. And I think there's a site in Aphrodisias where there's a whole load of things where showing friezes where all these different provinces are being subjugated and treated absolutely terribly by the Romans. And then you get really positive reactions to, you know, and the Romans are also very liberal about, you know, about other people's religions and other people's cultures and things. So it's a very, very weird, interesting mixture. Do you use your language much? Is it a thing you're particularly interested in, or are you finding now that other things are sort of taking your interest?
No, I very much love the language and the literature. Yeah, because I think it's fascinating how much you can get out of it that you can then also apply alongside more sort of archaeological things as well. So yeah, just as an example, I do Eleanor, who's speaking next. I did her module on Africa this year, which I absolutely loved. And one of the essays that I did for it was looking at a very sort of specific kind of part of the prologue of Apuleius' Metamorphoses, which is a prose novel, and it's sort of looking at that and how he uses sort of rhetorical techniques and what he says in this prologue, which is very different. It's got a very different kind of vibe to the rest of the novel. To sort of say things about kind of ideas of like third culture and being a sort of a Roman or an African, or kind of these hierarchies of cultures that there were in the ancient Mediterranean. So sort of Rome on top, then Greece, and then Africa, and all these other places, and sort of how it's kind of a social commentary on that. So yeah, no, it was absolutely fascinating.
It's a great book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, if people haven't read it, it's called Metamorphosis, or sometimes called The Golden Ass. Well, and about a third of the way through, or about halfway through, the narrator gets turned into an ass, and it's all about him trying to turn back, and he gets into all sorts of bawdy, I think is one word, lots of adventures and scrapes, but it's definitely worth it. It's very, very unlike most sort of ancient literature. It's a very interesting read. Okay, has anyone got any questions for us yet, or do you just want us to chat amongst ourselves? What we do here at Warwick, we just sit around chatting. Any questions? I should say how I got into classics, being an old person. When I was about 10, I think, or maybe a bit earlier, you had those really, really terrible but great films of Jason and the Argonauts, all the sort of stop motion animation. So there's the one where he's fighting all the skeletons and things. So that was one of the first things that got me into it. And then when I was 10, the first Clash of the Titans film came out. Not the remake, but the one with the mechanical owl, and and again these stop motion animation stuff. And that got me really interested. And then when I was about 16, I kind of decided that I wanted to read all about Greek myths, and I don't know where that came from. I didn't study any languages. We didn't do classics at our school. I suddenly got into this mythology, but then I'd already chosen my A levels, and I'd chosen biology, chemistry, physics. And I ended up going to university and studying zoology, which was absolutely great. But at the same time, I was also sort of sneakily reading books on classics. And then when I was about to turn 40 and having a midlife crisis, I thought, what do I really want to do? I want to go back to university and study classics. So that was how I got into it. And when I went back as an almost 40-year-old, again, I had no Latin, I had no Greek, and I was surrounded sometimes by quite a few people who already had a bit of language. But it was fine. You catch up really quickly. You find, I found that the language, especially Greek, was so much fun. I absolutely loved learning ancient Greek. And then within about 4 or 5 years, I was teaching a bit of ancient Greek here at Warwick. So, in a very short period of time, you can sort of catch up a lot. So if you feel that you don't have any language skills, or you haven't had the chance to learn any languages, then that's absolutely not a problem. You can, if it is something you find you're interested in, then you can catch up really quickly. Okay, I think I've seen movement on the...
Yeah, I unmuted myself to remind you. Question from Emily at Exeter School about how the course works for those without Latin as first that popped in.
Okay, so who came here without Latin? Did any of you? Yeah, so Rhys, how did it work for you? What route did you?
So I take the classical civilization course because I didn't have Latin or any other ancient language or any modern language. And what that kind of meant is that when I came in, and it's just changed this year actually, I did beginners Latin, which used to run throughout the whole year, but for the years coming up, it's going to be kind of you do your first term, so the first 10 or so weeks you can try out the ancient languages. If you love them, you can keep them. If you don't love them, you don't have to worry about them, which is a new thing. So don't worry too much about them. When you do languages, when you turn up, they start out as easy as you can get. And if we're still using Familia Romana for Latin, then it kind of works in the way you teach a small child, in which you learn like a few words and you add a few words to the sentence and you add a few words to the sentence. It kind of is a very natural flowing course rather than a more traditional repetitive grammar course in the beginners level. So I found it not too much of an adjustment. I mean, I did most I have of languages like GCSE Spanish from a while back, and I didn't find it really super hard. I think it really helped alongside my other modules as well, because you'd see like a tiny little bit of Latin text or a tiny little bit of something, you could be like, I know that one word, I can't read the rest of the sentence, but I know that one word, and then you kind of understand why people start using these words and you get to see bigger connections. So you can still study at Warwick if you don't have languages. It just means you probably won't be doing one of the language focused degree streams.
I think that technically any of our degree courses that are just called classics, the classics with English or just classics, you need the language. But classical civilization, all of our other ones, you don't need it at all. And they're all equally as valid. So it's not like we look down on people without the language, because there are so many different routes and so many different ways into this. What places are available as part of the study abroad program? Yeah, Charlie.
So I'm going to answer both the study abroad questions together, because I know that Rosie has one about the qualifications. So in terms of the languages, I guess if you're already doing Latin and Greek and coming to do classics, that's kind of fine. You can do the study abroad option. If you haven't had any ancient languages, really Warwick just looks to see if you have any evidence that you're capable of learning a language, because obviously it will be quite a fast-paced course to get you ready to go and travel in your third year. So if you've done maybe a language at GCSE level, I did French at GCSE and that was fine. They just want to see that you're capable of learning a language in quite an intense environment. And then in terms of where you can go, so you can go to Italy. So there's Rome, Bologna, Padua and Venice. And a new option for you guys will be Germany. So you can do, so those are the ones, so Italy and Germany are the ones that are kind of incorporated in your degree, and your degree title will be classics or classic or ancient history with study in Europe. You can always do other options like Rhys said, where at the end of your second year you might decide you want to do a year abroad. A lot of other classics students go to Australia. They go to Monash University because we partner with them, so that's another option if you want to do a year abroad but don't necessarily want to learn a new language alongside the rest of your degree. And just to point out, if you are going to do your study in Europe option, you in your first year, one of your 30 cats, basically one whole module would be taken up by your language learning, so either German or Italian, which means that you will have one less classics module, but obviously it means that you can go and study abroad in your third year. So yeah, I think that's everything about study abroad. If you have any other questions, just pop them in chat.
Okay, are there any other questions that we feel we can answer here?
Well, the next one in the general order is from someone called Oscar at say Xavier College. It's just how different is classics at uni from the A level. I did classical civilization A level, and the content is a little bit similar to the first year modules, but the university ones are in such broader depth. So the main big middle points, because I think I did the Odyssey and some bits of art in my A level, and those things did turn up again, which was nice, but I can't learn them to a university level of degree of information. What I'd say is the difference is that the breadth of information available at university is a lot more. So you're introduced to a lot more content from a wider space as well. The A level seems to be quite narrow and the big easy texts where there's a lot of learning support and stuff, whereas at the universities content tends to be tailored to what the lecturers are comfortable with, what they're learning about, what they're researching. So you'd be the things that you expect, and then there's some random things in there, content kind of fluctuates because of what the lecturers research, which means you get a lot more fresh information that isn't necessarily as familiar to you, and a lot more interesting because it covers the wider span of classics and it gets a little bit less Eurocentric.
Yeah, I think some of the videos that we posted today as part of this Ancient Worlds Day give a bit more of an idea of the wider scope of the stuff that we do study. So even though on paper sometimes it looks like the focus is still quite narrow, I think in reality the focus is really broad when you actually get to university. How did the others find sort of studying at university as opposed to doing A levels? How did it change?
I can hop on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I obviously did classics and I did Latin A level. and then went on to do a module called Latin Literary Texts, which is the kind of post A-level first year course that we all did. And it was quite a big step up, I'm not going to lie. I had gone through Latin A-level being pretty sort of handheld through it and sort of translating only really in class and line by line. And then in my first term at Warwick, I basically got given book 12, the last book of the Aeneid, and was just basically told to translate this whole thing this term. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But actually, once that initial panic sort of fades, you do really start to get into it. And not only does your Latin skill level go up like this, you gain so much more out of it. You start to learn how to use things like commentaries and read articles alongside it, and your grammar and vocab goes up as well. And so it does seem like a lot of work, and it's a lot more independent work, but it's so worth it. And not just for like your skill level, but also to prepare for what comes after that, which is now having done the Latin literary text module in first year, and as now we're finishing second year and going into third year, you can take what's called like a text option, which basically means you study whatever module you choose. So for example, I've done 2 text options this year. I did Africa with Eleanor, and I did a module on Augustus. And I study those with everyone else who studies the normal sort of history side. And then I go back and study for like an extra lecture a week, the texts in the original language rather than in translation. So you really get that full circle of working with the texts and the Latin, and also looking at it alongside things like material culture and stuff. So it's definitely a step up, but also it is manageable. And there's a lot of support as well, because when I had my initial panic with the Aeneid, my lecturer, and I didn't say anything, and I wasn't going to say anything because I think I was a bit embarrassed because I wasn't very good. And he sort of noticed and came up to me after class one day, and he was like, I feel like you're struggling, you're not really participating in lectures and stuff. Let's come up with like a study program for you. And he did, and he sent me off to like extra classes and things. And, you know, by the end of that term, I'd really caught up with everyone else, and had a really good sort of base to then improve from again. So there's a lot of support available, even though it's a step up. So yeah.
The main difference I noticed is because, for example, at school, we spent basically an entire year studying the Odyssey, and or at least a term, I should say. And then by the time you get through it, you go into every single line, all this. Whereas at uni, you might have a 2-hour lecture on it in a term, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because university, at least in first year at Warwick, it's about finding what you enjoy. And because at Warwick specifically, we do a module called Greek Culture and Society and Roman Culture and Society. Well, they're 2, I should say. And basically that is, you have each week there's a 2-hour lecture on a specific aspect of the Greek world. And that could be anything from food and drink to art to the Odyssey to the Iliad, democracy in Athens. And basically what it's about is finding what you enjoy, and then from that, you can pick modules in your second year that you like. So for example, if you like religion, you can do Paul's Greek religion module. If you like democracy, you can do Michael's democracy and imperialism module. So it's very tailored. You can basically tailor your degree to what you enjoy. So there'll be unlikely to be a circumstance where you're doing a module that you have no idea about, because there's so much choice, especially next year with new modules coming in, which are only 15 cats, which means you only do a term on this one module. I'm not too sure what they are, but I know there's going to be one on myth, which I wish I could do, but I can't.
Yeah, I think that there's 2 new ones on myth. There's a whole load of stuff. I'm teaching one with Michael about public engagement in classics. So that's going to, and part of that we'll be getting students to do public engagement projects.
I can chime in and say that'll be fun.
Hopefully,
I did public engagement, but with a separate department, because we didn't offer it yet. And it's a really good thing to get involved with if you're learning classics or class civ, because there's so many initiatives and foundations out at the minute, including Paul's and Michael's, to help get people involved in classics. So in terms of work experience and stuff like that, it's a really good thing. Even if you just do the module and you don't do any like formal work experience, it still kind of counts.
Yeah, thanks, Rhys. And we're really trying to push the idea of work experience. We've got, I mean, in the last year I've been making connections with local museums, local schools, and we're getting our students to do work experience in museums, in teaching, you know, all this sort of stuff that are being developed as part of our public engagement here at Warwick. And I think that, you know, us doing that is, it's actually quite a unique thing for universities. Not, you know, you won't find that at very many universities. And I think it's partly the fact that we've got Michael here, who is so public focused. The idea of getting classics out there to a wider audience is part of what we do. So getting students on board to help us with that gives them work experience in education, in heritage as well. I mean, if you want to go into work into museums and stuff like that, actually getting on that ladder is very difficult. You know, getting the jobs, the competition is so large. But here at Warwick, we can probably help you, you know, get some work experience with local museums and that sort of thing, which is going to really help you in your future career and help you get an idea of what, you know, what these future careers are like. Okay, any other questions?
I was just going to quickly refer back to Ellie's question, which is what stood out about classics/classical civilization at Warwick. And I would say that what you and Michael do as well with the engagement and just how innovation focused Warwick had, like it's a classics and classical civilization degree stream, but it's very much focused on innovation and how to make the old new and fresh. And that's something that some departments kind of gave up on when I was shopping around my universities. And like one of the things that did stand out on my open days is just how hard and how effectively everyone was making stuff interesting and fresh and new, and how can we get more students involved, and how can we get like stakeholders involved, and how can we do all these fun cool things, which is like not very common anywhere. Or at least from the 4 or 5 universities I went to.
Yeah, so I think you have to have a selling point, something that can bring the students in that they don't get in other places. And I think so for us, our 2 speakers today, you know, Michael and Eleanor, Michael running his global history, you know, which is the first, you know, classics global history module, I think, that sort of anywhere in the country that I know of. And Eleanor, who I'll mention in a minute, has won an award for her module from the students themselves, and that's about Africa. You know, these are sort of groundbreaking modules and looking at classics in a new way. We're very friendly department, and we're all about, you know, exploring new things and working with the students and finding out what it is that the students like doing, what is it that interests them, and you know, if we can be driven as a department by that sort of thing, then I think we're doing well. What do any of the others? What do you think makes Warwick stand out from other universities?
Shall I go just to sort of build on that point a bit? Yeah, one of the things that really struck me when I came to visit for open days and stuff was just how friendly the department was. And, you know, I've got a brother who's a couple of years older than me, and he was at Bath and studying politics, so slightly different and a slightly larger degree course as well. And he was like, I don't think any of my lecturers actually even know my name. Whereas here, everyone knows everyone and everyone really cares about everyone as well. And that's not just sort of in like the pastoral care kind of situation and, you know, being interested in people's lives outside classics, but that's also sort of seen in like the degree and stuff. So, you know, just like as a couple of examples, on my open day, I was talking to Emanuela, who does Greek theatre, and 6 months later when I came, she remembered me from my open day. I was like, I remember you. And, you know, and I'd only spoken to her for literally like 10 minutes on this open day, and she remembered. And then Eleanor, I'm not sure if she's here yet, but I'm probably going to really embarrass her, but she's absolutely brilliant. And I've loved her module this year, and, you know, doing a Latin sort of text option with that as well. I was with her quite a lot in slightly smaller classes as well. And I did an essay and handed it in. And she said in the feedback, she was like, you know, if you wanted to, we could have gone through this and I would have changed your essay question to match what you wanted to write about more. Like, I'm completely flexible with that. And that's something really, I think, that is seen in a lot of modules, is that they really do sort of cater to you and to what you're interested in. And they can really kind of do whatever really to sort of cater for you. Yeah.
That's great. Anyone else? what makes Warwick? No, we're on the sort of selling Warwick bit here. What makes Warwick special?
The society. I know every university has societies, but our one's particularly proactive. George can attest to that. He was president last year.
I was. Yeah, this is sort of my main thing, I suppose. Well, the Classic Society, it's basically it's just great. Well, because basically what we do is we just put on like loads of events for freshers and anyone at uni, and it's basically just a little family basically, because everyone knows each other. We do all sorts, to be honest. We do some academic talks, we go to museums, we go to the pub, we have bar crawls, we have a symposium, we have an annual ball. But the biggest thing I think we should say is that we put on the annual classics play, which is part of the Ancient Drama Day, which is probably the biggest thing we do, because it has a budget of around £20,000, which is it's the largest student-run production on campus, and it's a classics play. Run by students. So like every year, as we elect roles, we elect a director and a producer, and they are in charge. They're in charge of basically hiring sound equipment, lighting, every aspect you can think of. It's student run, so it's a great way to get involved. And of course, I'm not an actor. It's not my sort of thing. But like every year, I've been involved behind the scenes. So in first year, I was basically a runner. Last year, I was head of the costuming for the whole play. And next year, I'll hopefully be doing my master's at Warwick. But unfortunately, this year, of course, it didn't go ahead. But next year, I'll be the stage manager, hopefully, as we're producing the back eye. So yeah, if acting is not your thing, get involved behind the stage. There's always something to do. And if acting is your thing, just go along and audition. Like, it's a lot of fun. And I'm sure the same can be said for most student societies at other universities. They'll basically be doing the same thing, but obviously ours is the best because of the play and all the other things we do. So
yeah, I mean, the play is a sort of magnificent thing, isn't it? It's you know, we book out the art centre for a few days, and we have, you know, it's packed with school kids, and the plays are really good. I mean, you know, the acting's shoddy, isn't it? When, you know, no, they're so professional. They are absolutely amazing. And in fact,
But take no flack for my 2-minute role.
what was your role?
It was just hanging Annie.
You bring that up because you literally bring that up every single time.
So
It's the most important thing ever.
So Annie, were you in it? Have you been in it?
I was. I had the pleasure and misfortune, perhaps, to play Jocasta in Oedipus Rex last year. Yeah, and Rhys was in charge of hanging me. Spoiler alert if you haven't read it. But
so if you want to see Rhys hanging Annie,
No one can see me. It's in a blackout.
How is it? That's disappointing. But all of the plays for the last few years are actually available on our website. We've got a special Warwick Drama website which you can get to via the Stower resources. I'll put the link into. Yeah, do check them out because they're absolutely fantastic. And again, it's such a huge thing. And if you're part of the Warwick Classic Society, then you can be part of this this annual event, which is, yeah, absolutely fantastic. I think we're gonna have to call it a day there because it's almost 3 o'clock. So thank you so much to our students, to Rhys, Charlie, Annie and George. Thanks for taking the time. I hope that you found that useful. I hope that we have about an extra 500 students coming to Warwick next year or in the next few years because of this.